Have you ever wondered why some people seem to live in a completely different reality than the rest of us? While you're working tirelessly toward your dreams, struggling to make progress, watching months and years slip by with minimal results, there are others who appear to snap their fingers and watch their desires materialize almost overnight. The job offer arrives out of nowhere. The perfect relationship walks through the door. The financial breakthrough happens when they least expect it. And you're left wondering, what do they know that I don't? Here's what might shock you. It has absolutely nothing to do with being more talented, more educated, or even more hardworking than you are. It's not about coming from the right family, knowing the right people, or having some mystical gift that was bestowed upon them at birth. What separates these individuals from everyone else is something far more profound. They've discovered how to access a specific frequency that literally bends the fabric of time and space around them. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Florence Scovel Shinn, one of the most revolutionary spiritual teachers of the 20th century, understood this secret long before. Quantum physics began validating what she taught. She recognized that there exists an invisible law governing manifestation, a frequency that most people never tune into because they're too busy exhausting themselves with techniques that barely scratch the surface of what's truly possible. Has this ever happened to you? You repeat your affirmations every single morning. You've created vision boards that cover your walls. You visualize until your head hurts. You're doing everything the experts tell you to do. And yet somehow, reality refuses to cooperate. The manifestations either don't come at all, or they arrive so slowly that you start questioning whether any of this spiritual stuff actually works. The truth is, you're not failing at manifestation. You've simply been taught methods that operate within the limitations of linear time, when what you really need is access to something that exists beyond time itself. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because this secret, frequency, doesn't work by adding more effort or more techniques to your spiritual practice. Instead, it works by removing the invisible barriers that have been keeping you trapped in a slow, frustrating timeline, while others seem to leap ahead effortlessly. Stay with me here, because understanding this distinction changes absolutely everything about your manifestation journey. When Florence Scovel Shinn spoke about the power of the word and the invisible law, she wasn't just talking about positive thinking or wishful affirmations. She was pointing towards something far more potent, a vibrational alignment that collapses the distance between where you are and where you want to be, transforming what should take years into mere moments. And that transformation begins with understanding why everything you've tried so far hasn't worked the way you hoped it would. What Florence Scovel Shinn discovered goes far beyond simple positive thinking or mental exercises. She understood something that modern quantum physicists are only now beginning to validate through scientific research, that beneath the surface of our individual thoughts, beneath the chatter of our personal worries and desires, there exists a vast, unified field of intelligence, a collective reservoir of wisdom and power that's been orchestrating reality long before you or I arrived on this planet. Most people live their entire lives completely unaware that this field even exists. They operate exclusively from the tiny island of their conscious mind, trying to muscle reality into submission through sheer willpower and determination. They push, they force, they struggle against the current, exhausting themselves in the process. And the tragic irony is that all of this effort actually blocks them from accessing the very thing that could transform their entire experience overnight. Think about it this way. Your conscious mind, as brilliant as it might be, can only process a minuscule fraction of the information that's available to you in any given moment. It's like trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon, or attempting to see the entire sky through a pinhole. You're working with such severe limitations that no amount of effort can compensate for what you simply cannot perceive from that restricted vantage point. But those individuals who seem to collapse time, who manifest with supernatural speed and precision, they've discovered something crucial. They've learned how to step out of that tiny conscious mind and tap into something infinitely larger, an ocean of intelligence that exists beyond their personal identity, beyond their individual story, beyond the limitations of what they think is possible based on past experience. When you make this shift, when you access this frequency that Florence Scovel Shinn taught about, reality begins to reorganize itself around you in ways that would seem impossible from your previous state of awareness. Synchronicities don't just happen. Occasionally, they multiply exponentially, appearing so frequently that you start to realize there's an invisible intelligence coordinating events behind the scenes of what you can consciously perceive. If you're not already subscribed, consider joining us. Every video here is designed to give you real tools to expand your consciousness and transform how you experience reality. Problems that you've been wrestling with for months suddenly present solutions out of thin air. The perfect person, with exactly the information you need, appears at precisely the right moment. Obstacles that seemed insurmountable simply dissolve without you having to fight against them. And time itself, that rigid, linear progression that everyone else seems bound by, begins to bend and flex according to your internal state rather than external circumstances. This isn't magic or fantasy. This is what happens when your personal consciousness learns to align with the patterns and principles that govern how the universal intelligence operates. You're no longer rowing against the current. You've discovered the current exists, and you've learned how to flow with it in a way that carries you effortlessly toward everything you've been seeking. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because there's a hidden truth here that completely transforms your understanding of why some people remain stuck while others break through. It has to do with something most spiritual teachers won't tell you, something about the very nature of frequency itself and how your relationship with your own emotions either opens or closes the door to this universal intelligence. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to understand," if this is resonating with you and you're beginning to see how profoundly different this is from everything you've been taught before. Here's where this gets really fascinating, and it's something that will completely shift how you understand your own emotional experiences. David R. Hawkins, a psychiatrist who dedicated decades to researching consciousness, discovered something that bridges the gap between Florence Scovel Shinn's spiritual teachings and measurable, observable reality. He found that emotions aren't just random feelings passing through you like weather patterns. They're actually precise indicators, like instruments on a dashboard, showing you exactly where your consciousness is vibrating on an actual energetic spectrum. At the lower end of this scale, you find the densest frequencies: shame, guilt, apathy, grief. When someone operates at these levels, something profound happens to their perception. It's not just that they feel bad. Their entire filtering system for interpreting reality becomes fundamentally altered. They literally cannot see the opportunities, the solutions, or the possibilities that exist right in front of them. It's as if they're wearing glasses that only show evidence of limitation, struggle, and impossibility, while everything else simply doesn't register in their awareness. This explains why two people can be in the exact same situation, with access to the exact same resources, and one sees nothing but dead ends while the other recognizes a dozen pathways forward. They're not living in different external realities. They're perceiving from different frequencies, and those frequencies determine what becomes visible or invisible to them. But here's the revelation that changes everything about your journey. Hawkins identified a specific threshold, a critical turning point where the entire game shifts. He called it courage. And what he discovered was that below this threshold, you're essentially operating in survival mode. You're reacting to life, defending yourself, protecting against threats, trying to avoid pain and loss. Every decision is filtered through fear. Every choice is about minimizing risk rather than maximizing possibility. Above courage, something remarkable happens. You transition from reacting to creating. from being shaped by circumstances to consciously shaping your experience. And as you continue moving higher up this spectrum, toward acceptance, toward love, toward joy, you're not just feeling better emotions. You're actually gaining access to dimensions of reality that were completely invisible to you before, like suddenly being able to see infrared or ultraviolet light that was always there but beyond your previous range of perception. This is the hidden mechanism behind why certain people seem to live in an accelerated timeline. They're not just thinking more positive thoughts. They've shifted their baseline frequency to a level where they can perceive and interact with layers of possibility that simply don't exist in the reality tunnel of someone operating from fear, shame, or apathy. The opportunities were always there. The synchronicities were always available. The shortcuts and solutions were always present. But they only become visible above a certain threshold of consciousness. And here's what might surprise you about reaching that threshold. It's not about forcing yourself to feel happy all the time or pretending negative emotions don't exist. In fact, that approach creates the opposite effect, and understanding why will completely transform your relationship with your own emotional landscape. Drop a comment saying, "I see it differently now," if this is starting to reveal something about why your previous attempts at raising your vibration might not have worked the way you expected. The whole good vibes only movement that's become so popular in spiritual circles is actually one of the biggest traps keeping people stuck at lower frequencies while convincing them they're doing everything right. Think about what happens when you adopt the belief that you must feel positive all the time to maintain high vibration. You've just created an impossible standard, a setup for failure that guarantees you'll end up feeling worse than when you started. Because here's what inevitably happens. Life throws you a curveball. Someone betrays your trust. You experience loss. You feel genuine anger or deep sadness or profound fear. These are completely natural human responses to real situations. But now, on top of that original emotion, you've added another entire layer. Guilt for feeling it. Shame for not being positive enough. Frustration with yourself for failing at something that should be simple. Self-judgment for being spiritually inadequate. That resistance, that internal war you're now waging against your own authentic experience, that's what actually collapses your frequency, not the original emotion itself. The sadness wasn't the problem. The anger wasn't blocking your manifestations. It was your refusal to allow those emotions to exist, your desperate attempt to suppress and deny what was genuinely present, that created the energetic blockage. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this deeply. She taught that the power isn't in denying your human experience, but in recognizing the divine truth that exists beyond it. You can feel the fear and still know you're divinely guided. You can acknowledge the anger and simultaneously trust in perfect outcomes. The emotions don't negate the truth. They're just temporary weather patterns passing through the vast sky of your consciousness. But here's what really determines your vibrational state. And this is the piece most people completely miss. Your true frequency isn't shaped by whatever emotion you happen to be feeling in this particular moment. It's determined by something far deeper, far more fundamental. There's an invisible architecture operating beneath the surface of your conscious awareness. A complex system of beliefs, convictions, expectations, and identity constructs that you've been carrying around, often without even realizing they're there. This hidden code is running in the background of your mind, like software you never consciously installed, determining what reality you experience, what opportunities you notice, what possibilities feel available to you. And until you become aware of this architecture, until you shine light on these subconscious patterns, you're essentially trying to change your life while keeping the same internal blueprint that created your current circumstances. This is where radical honesty becomes non-negotiable. Not the kind of honesty where you present a carefully curated version of yourself to the world, or where you tell yourself comfortable stories about why things are the way they are. I'm talking about the kind of honesty that requires you to look directly at where you actually are right now, beneath all the justifications and rationalizations and spiritual bypassing? What do you really believe about your own capabilities when nobody's watching? What are your true expectations about how life works for someone like you? What convictions have you been operating from that you've never questioned because they feel so fundamentally true? These invisible structures are broadcasting your frequency far more powerfully than any affirmation you could ever repeat, and they're creating your reality with mathematical precision. The transformation you're seeking requires you to become aware of these patterns, to see the hidden mechanisms that have been running your life from behind the scenes. And that awareness itself begins to shift everything, because you can't change what you can't see. Right, I'm willing to see in the comments if you're ready to move beyond the surface and examine what's really been creating your experience all along. There's something profound that ancient wisdom traditions understood about the nature of reality that modern self-help culture has completely forgotten. The universe doesn't operate on a principle of static, permanent happiness. Everything in existence moves in cycles, in rhythms. The seasons change from spring to summer, to fall to winter, and back again. The tides rise and fall twice daily. Day becomes night, night becomes day. Your own heartbeat is a rhythm, your breath is a rhythm. Even your brain waves oscillate between different frequencies depending on your state of consciousness. This is one of the fundamental Hermetic principles that govern all of reality, the principle of rhythm. The pendulum swings in all things. And here's where most people create unnecessary suffering for themselves. They're trying to hold the pendulum fixed at one extreme, attempting to maintain constant positivity while denying the natural movement that wants to occur. It's like trying to hold your breath forever or demanding that the ocean stop moving. The effort required to maintain that impossible standard creates enormous internal tension, and that tension itself becomes the very thing that keeps you vibrating at a lower frequency. But what if there was a different way of relating to your experience altogether? What if, instead of trying to control which emotions you feel, you could develop a kind of consciousness that remains stable and elevated regardless of what's moving through you? This is where we enter territory that completely transforms everything we've been discussing. It's called observer consciousness, and it's the secret that separates those who truly access high frequencies from those who are just performing positivity while internally struggling. Here's what this looks like in practice. Anger arises in your experience. The old, a pattern, the unconscious pattern, is immediate identification. You collapse your entire sense of self down into that emotion and declare, I am angry. In that moment, you've just become the anger. Your consciousness has contracted to match the frequency of that emotion. And now you're seeing the world through the lens of anger, making decisions from anger, creating from anger. But there's another possibility available to you, one that requires awareness but becomes more natural with practice. You notice the anger arising, and you create just a tiny bit of space between the awareness and the emotion. You say internally, with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, there is anger present in my experience right now. Do you feel the profound difference in those words? You haven't denied the emotion or pretended it doesn't exist. You're not suppressing it or spiritually bypassing it, but you also haven't confused it with your identity. That simple shift in language reflects a quantum leap in consciousness. You've stepped back into the position of the witness, the observer, the awareness that can see the anger without being consumed by it. And here's what's remarkable about that witnessing awareness. It operates at a naturally higher frequency than any emotion, whether that emotion is supposedly positive or negative. You're no longer trapped in the content of your experience. You've become the space in which all content arises and falls away. This observer perspective is what Florence Scovel Shinn was pointing toward when she spoke about standing firm in spiritual truth regardless of appearances. The appearances change, the emotions change, the circumstances change. But the consciousness that witnesses all of this remains stable, elevated, connected to that universal intelligence we talked about earlier. And from that vantage point, you gain access to insights, intuitions, and guidance that were completely unavailable when you were identified with the emotional. Whether. Leave a comment saying, "I am the witness," if you're beginning to understand how this shift in perspective changes your entire relationship with everything you experience. Now, let me show you something that bridges everything we've been discussing with what's actually happening at the deepest levels of physical reality. Because this isn't just spiritual philosophy or abstract theory. Modern science is now confirming what mystics and teachers like Florence Scovel Shinn have been pointing toward for over a century. Quantum physics has completely shattered the old materialist view that reality is solid, fixed, and independent of observation. What physicists have discovered is genuinely mind-bending. This solid world you think you're living in, the chair you're sitting on, the device you're holding, even your own body. At the quantum level, none of these are actually solid objects. They're patterns of energy and information, vibrating fields of possibility, mostly empty space, dancing in constant motion. The solidity you experience is an interpretation your senses create from a tiny fraction of what's actually present. And here's the part that changes everything about manifestation. We're only perceiving about 5% of what actually exists. Our senses can only detect a narrow slice of the electromagnetic spectrum. There are entire dimensions of reality operating all around you right now. Frequencies, broadcasting, information flowing, possibilities existing that are completely invisible to your ordinary perception. This isn't speculation or metaphysical fantasy. This is established scientific fact. So when you expand your consciousness, when you access that observer awareness we've been exploring, you're not just changing how you feel about reality. You're literally gaining access to layers of reality that were previously invisible to you. You're tuning into frequencies that have always been broadcasting, but that you couldn't detect from your previous state of awareness. This is the mechanism behind those seemingly miraculous synchronicities, those perfect timing moments, those opportunities that appear out of nowhere when you shift your internal state. But here's what matters more than any of this understanding. Here's the truth that separates people who transform their lives from people who just accumulate interesting information. Knowledge without application is nothing more than entertainment. You can listen to 100 videos about consciousness, read 50 books about manifestation, understand every principle intellectually, and still remain trapped in the exact same reality you've always experienced. Transformation doesn't happen through accumulation of information. It happens in the small daily choices, the micro decisions you make in those critical moments when you catch yourself about to react automatically. That split second when frustration arises and you have a choice, collapse into it or witness it. That instant when fear appears and you can either believe it completely or recognize it as a temporary visitor passing through your awareness. Every single time you make the conscious choice to pause, to breathe, to ask yourself what you're accepting as truth in this moment, you're doing something far more powerful than you realize. You're rewiring your nervous system. You're expanding your perceptual capacity. You're raising your baseline frequency. And you're accessing that secret frequency Florence Scovel Shinn taught about, the one that collapses time itself and brings your desired reality closer with each conscious choice. This is where the real work happens. Not in the grand declarations or the perfect morning routines, but in these seemingly small moments of awareness throughout your day. Each one is an opportunity to either reinforce the old patterns or create new pathways. Write "I choose awareness" in the comments if you're recognizing that this entire journey is about the decisions you make moment by moment, not some distant breakthrough you're waiting for. So, here we are. And if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, I want you to know that means something significant. Most people would have clicked away after the first few minutes, looking for a quick fix or an easy answer that requires no real understanding. But you stayed because you recognized that genuine transformation requires depth, nuance, and a willingness to see things from angles you might never have considered before. If something shifted for you during this conversation, if you found yourself nodding along or suddenly seeing your own experience through a clearer lens, I'd genuinely appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. Not because it feeds some algorithm, but because it helps this kind of content reach other people who are searching for real understanding rather than spiritual platitudes and empty promises. And if you're not already part of this community, consider subscribing to the channel. What we explore here isn't about quick fixes or trendy techniques. We dive into the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern understanding, always with the intention of giving you something practical, something you can actually use to shift how you experience reality. Every video is crafted with care, designed to meet you wherever you are and offer genuine tools for expansion. Leave a comment saying, "This was meant for me," if you feel like this message found you at exactly the right time. I read every single comment, and I'm genuinely curious about where you are in your own journey of consciousness. There's a video right here that takes what we've explored today even deeper, showing you specific practices for maintaining this elevated awareness even when life gets challenging. Click and continue with me over there. I think you'll find it's the perfect next step from where we are right now. Thank you for being here, for staying present, and for choosing awareness over autopilot. I'll see you in the next one.